Well, friends, I was toying with the idea of taking a day off from doing a Justice Matters video, but then Mark Meadows lost in federal court. Big time. So, let's talk about it, because justice matters. Hey all, Glenn Kirshner here. Well, friends, you've probably heard by now that a federal district court judge, Judge Steve Jones, denied former Chief of Staff Mark Meadows' motion to try to have his RICO prosecution transferred from Georgia State Court to federal court. So what does that mean? Well, it means Meadows and Donald Trump, together with lots of other RICO defendants, criminal associates, co-conspirators, will now be sitting shoulder to shoulder in a state courtroom in Fulton County, Georgia, being tried for their crimes, and it will be televised and live streamed. Let's start with the new reporting. This from CNN. Headline: Judge rejects Mark Meadows' bid to move Georgia election interference case to federal court. And that article begins, a federal judge on Friday rejected former White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows' bid to move his Georgia criminal case to federal court, a significant setback for Meadows, and a troubling sign for former President Donald Trump. U.S. District Judge Steve Jones found that the allegations against Meadows contained in the Fulton County District Attorney's indictment on election subversion charges were largely related to political activities and not to Meadows' role as White House Chief of Staff. Quote, the evidence before the court overwhelmingly suggests that Meadows was not acting in the scope of executive branch duties during most of the overt acts alleged, wrote Judge Jones, a Barack Obama appointee. The judge's decision could set the tone for the other defendants also trying to move their cases. It's an ominous sign for the defendants who are hoping to invoke the same federal immunity protections. Jones wrote in the decision that Meadows had not met even the quite low threshold for removal to federal court because his activities for the Trump campaign were outside the scope of his federal role as White House Chief of Staff. And here is probably my favorite quote. Meadows cannot have acted in his role as a federal officer with respect to any efforts to influence, interfere with, disrupt, oversee, or change state elections. So friends, there is nothing but bad news for Meadows and Trump, because if Meadows' case to have his prosecution transferred from state court to federal court was weak, then Donald Trump's case is non-existent. I even question whether Trump's lawyers will bother filing a motion to try to get his case transferred from state court to federal court, because given this decision by Judge Jones, which is not binding, it doesn't control a motion if one is filed by Donald Trump, but it is a sure sign that Donald Trump has no legitimate argument to move his RICO prosecution from state court to federal court. So what else can we glean from what just happened in the Meadows case? Well, first of all, as I say, that means Meadows, Trump, and the others will be sitting in the same courtroom in Georgia being prosecuted for their RICO crimes to try to overturn the results of the Georgia state election. It will be televised, it will be live streamed, and that will make it much harder for Donald Trump's lawyers, his mouthpieces, his flunkies, his lackeys, his sycophants, to deceive the American people about what's going on inside the courtroom, because we're going to get to watch it for ourselves. Here's the other thing. I can't quite understand why Meadows decided to take on this fool's errand of trying to get his case transferred from state court to federal court. Why do I say that? Because he testified in the hearing. He had to, if he was going to have any hope of convincing the judge to transfer his case. And it looks like during his testimony, Meadows may very well have perjured himself. Now, without sort of going into all of the details of his 4 or 5 hours of testimony, let me just give you one example, a little flavor for just how bad Mark Meadows performed as a witness. There was one point where Mark Meadows testified under oath, "I had nothing to do with the alternate elector scheme, with the fake elector scheme." And then he was cross-examined by some of District Attorney Fani Willis's prosecutors, and he was shown some of his own emails and or text messages where people were urging him to involve himself in the alternate elector, the fake elector scheme. And what did Mark Meadows write? "I am working on that as of yesterday." It seems to contradict what he told the court under oath, that he had nothing to do with the fake elector scheme. Now, is that perjury? Well, if he lied under oath, it is. But here is the only out for Mark Meadows, and it is not a very appealing out. Mark Meadows could say, "Well, I told the truth in court when I said I wasn't working on the alternate elector scheme. I was actually lying to everybody in my private emails and text messages when I said I was." Come on, Mark. Really? Is that what you're going to go with? So one way or another, Mark Meadows will expose himself as a liar. It's just a question of when he was lying under oath in court or in his private emails and text messages. I mean, that's when I tend to lie the most, right? I want to deceive all my friends when I'm emailing them and text messaging them about how I am working diligently, feverishly to try to keep Donald Trump in office unconstitutionally. Yet none of these arguments are going to buy Mark Meadows any points in the eyes of a jury when Mark Meadows goes to trial in state court with Donald Trump and his other co-conspirators for trying to steal the Georgia state election. And the fact that Mark Meadows just completely tanked his own credibility and did himself some real damage with respect to his future trial, that's a good thing. Because justice matters. Friends, as always, please stay safe, please stay tuned, and I look forward to talking with you all again tomorrow.